We don't notice how quickly we get attached to our thoughts. It happens under our skin, not in a loud way, but in something more intimate, more stealthy. Something hurts us, and a thought rushes in like a well meaning friend. You're not good enough. We don't ask it who it is or why it's here, we just let it in. And soon, it's not just a thought anymore, it's our identity. I am not good enough. There's the shift, the slippery, almost invisible slide from noticing a feeling to becoming the feeling. That's where emotional rigidity starts to grow. What Susan David does in emotional agility is hand us a flashlight, not a cure, not a motivational speech, a flashlight. She teaches us how to gently hold up that light to what we're feeling without flinching, without immediately needing to fix it. That's not small, that's everything. Because most of us are not avoiding our emotions because we're cold or detached. We're avoiding them because we're scared. Because to let a painful feeling speak is to let it threaten everything we've built on top of it. So she teaches presence, but not the sanitized kind. She talks about noticing, naming, allowing. But here's the thing, what we do with emotions isn't just about control or management, it's about trust. Deep soul level trust that you are not going to collapse if you feel this feeling. You might be changed, yes, but maybe that's not collapse, maybe that's growth. When I first started absorbing the book, I expected to get tips. I didn't expect to get questions, like the kind of questions that don't demand an answer, but peel away at the layers you didn't know you had. What are you pretending not to know? And what values are you sacrificing by trying to stay comfortable? These are not soft questions. But Susan doesn't throw them at you. She offers them like quiet mirrors, and you look, or you don't. But if you do, really do, it's not the emotion that scares you anymore. It's what you've been doing to avoid it. There's a point she makes early on that stayed with me long after the book ended. Emotions are data, not directives. That sounds so clean, so easy, but try applying it the next time you feel shame or rage or grief. Try saying to yourself, here's some data. While your chest tightens or your voice wants to scream or your heart feels like it might come undone. It's not easy, but it's liberating because it gives you space. You are not your reaction. You are not fused with your thoughts. There's space between the match and the flame. You just forgot. And here's where I want us to go deeper beyond the page. Beyond the book, because something I've learned walking with this idea is that agility doesn't mean avoidance, and it doesn't mean constant calm either. It means you know how to pivot when life shoves you in the ribs. You know how to feel without falling apart. You let yourself get angry without making someone else a villain. You grieve without deciding that life is only suffering. You learn how to stay with something ugly and still believe in your own softness. This skill, this emotional flexibility, isn't about bullet journaling your feelings or meditating them into submission. It's about intimacy, not with someone else, with yourself, which is maybe the hardest in intimacy of all. We lie to ourselves more often than we lie to anyone else. We distract ourselves more quickly. We abandon our own truths, not out of malice, but out of old habit. And Susan David isn't just saying, feel more. She's saying, notice what you feel, name it honestly, and stop letting it drive your life without your consent. Imagine this. You've just received feedback that cuts deeper than it should. Maybe it's at work, maybe from someone you love. You nod politely, you smile. You might even say, thank you. But something under your skin coils. The shame, the anger, the how dare they, or they're right, I'm a failure. It sparks. That's where we usually freeze or flee. And in that tiny moment, emotional agility either blooms or dies. We think agility means grace, but it often begins with a mess, with sweat, with a pulse that's racing and an inner monologue that sounds like a war room. It starts by saying, wait, what am I actually feeling? Not just I'm mad, but I feel dismissed, I feel invisible, I feel like I disappointed myself. Getting specific is the opposite of sprilling. It's anchoring, because you can't pivot from a fog. You have to see clearly first, and clarity always starts with honesty. One thing Susan David emphasizes, and it's something I've had to relearn over and over, is that emotional agility doesn't mean emotional permission to act out. It means presence with responsibility. Like, yes, you're hurt, but can you be with that pain long enough to understand what value it's poking? Maybe you're hurt because you care deeply about fairness. Maybe you're angry because someone violated a boundary you never said out loud. Maybe your sadness is grief for a life that no longer fits. If we move too fast past our emotions, we miss the gold. We miss the moment in our values are trying to speak through our discomfort. That's the treasure map in the pain, and no one talks about that. We're so quick to get rid of the feeling that we forget it's trying to tell us something that matters. Emotional agility asks, can you sit with the emotion long enough to translate it into wisdom? Because until you do, you'll act out the emotion. Instead of understanding it, you'll blame, you'll numb, you'll self-sabotage, or worse, you'll harden. But what if instead of reacting, we paused? What if just for a beat you said, this is data, not destiny. This is a moment, not a label. I'm feeling overwhelmed, but I am not an overwhelmed person. That pause is everything. It's where your power lives, and it's where the next right step reveals itself. Now, here's something I found that the book touches on, but doesn't fully unfold. Emotional agility doesn't just help you survive the tough moments. It helps you stay soft after them. And that might be the bravest thing of all, because when life hits you hard, it's so easy to armor up, to tell yourself, next time I won't care. Next time I won't try so hard. But that's not strength, that's shutdown. True strength is learning to feel the sting without letting it build a wall around your heart. That's why this whole concept is not about being better. It's about being braver. Emotionally agile people aren't immune to pain. They're just more fluent in it. They've learned the language of fear, of sadness, of joy, of discomfort, and they don't panic when those emotions show up. They listen, they let them visit, but not run the house. And here's the most original insight I can offer from my own journey through this. Agility is not just internal, it's relational. When you're emotionally agile, the people around you feel safer. Why? Because they can be messy and you don't make it about you. They can change and you don't cling. They can hurt and you can hold space without fixing them. That kind of steadiness is rare, and it's born not from control but from compassion, the kind you've given to yourself first. Most of us think transformation happens in the big cinematic moments. Quitting the job, ending the relationship, having the breakdown that leads to the breakthrough. But emotional agility is built in the quiet, in the mundane, in the space between stimulus and response, between what someone says and what we choose to hear, between what we feel and what we do next. And those choices, tiny, invisible to the world, are everything. Like when someone interrupts you and you feel that flash of irritation, your impulse might be to shut down or lash out. But there's a flicker of awareness now. You catch it, you take one breath, you ask yourself, what am I really feeling right now? Not in a performative way, not because you want to be emotionally perfect, but because you're tired of being owned by knee-jerk reactions. That's agility, not the absence of the emotion, but the presence of a wiser pause. Or think about how often you say, I'm fine, when you're not. Emotional agility challenges that too. Not by forcing you to overshare, but by asking, who are you trying to protect with that answer? And what might shift if you told the truth, not just to others, but to yourself? The truth is, agility doesn't mean you're always composed. It means you know where you're standing internally. That's what makes the difference. Like you could be crying in the shower or pacing your kitchen or staring into space after an argument and still be emotionally agile, because in those moments, you're not abandoning yourself. You're staying close to what's real. You're saying, yes, this is hard, and I'm still here. Here's something I've learned that isn't always explicit in the book, but comes up the more you live this work. Agility is redefined every day. What was brave for you last week might feel easy now. What used to be terrifying, like expressing a need or admitting uncertainty, can slowly become natural. That's the miracle of practicing presence. You start to recalibrate your baseline. You begin to build a relationship with yourself that doesn't rely on self-bullying or constant fixing. It's rooted in companionship. But here's where it gets subtle. Sometimes emotional agility asks you not to engage, not to spiral, not to entertain the storyline that you're unworthy or broken or too much. Sometimes the most agile move is to lovingly say, "Not today. I've heard this story before. I don't need to live it again." That's not bypassing, that's discernment. You can feel a feeling without feeding it, that you can acknowledge a thought without building a house in it. We're not taught this. We're taught to chase positivity or avoid discomfort or be strong by numbing. But Susan David's work whispers something different. Strength is presence. Strength is softness with boundaries. Strength is showing up, not as a curated version of yourself, but as the real, breathing, shifting, feeling human you actually are. What that looks like in real life might be ugly and sacred at the same time. It's admitting you're scared before a meeting. It's saying no when you were trained to people please. It's walking away from self-sabotage, not because you hate yourself, but because you finally remembered you don't have to live there. And over time, something extraordinary happens. You stop being afraid of your inner world. You stop trying to control everything outside of you to avoid feeling certain things. You start letting life touch you, and you touch it back. Not from a place of defense, but from a place of grounded, truthful courage. Sometimes the most difficult part of emotional growth is realizing that no matter how agile you become, the world doesn't always reward it. You've practiced presence. You've shown up truthfully, you've named your feelings, honored your values, tried to act in alignment, and still someone disappoints you. The loss happens, the boundary gets violated, the job says no, the love ends, the illness comes, the friend ghosts you anyway. And you might think, what was the point of all this emotional work if pain still finds me? But that question reveals something we're all quietly hoping for, that self-development will somehow make us immune. That if we evolve enough, we won't bleed when life cuts. That if we're honest and compassionate and self-aware, we won't break. But emotional agility doesn't promise protection. It promises resilience. The pain still comes. But now you know how to sit with it without letting it define you. Now you know how to move through it without abandoning yourself. You bleed, but you don't forget who you are. That's the difference. Let's be real. Emotional agility doesn't make you less human. It makes you more human, more awake, which can feel like a curse on bad days. Because when you're awake, you feel more. You notice the tension under someone's smile. You sense when something's off. You can't numb as easily. But that sensitivity is not weakness. It's the deepest kind of knowing, and it lets you live a life that actually means something. There's this moment that happens in people who live with agility. It's not flashy. It doesn't get applause, but it's quiet and holy. It's when someone hurts them and they don't rush to retaliate or shrink. They just breathe, feel it, mourn it, and then they choose deliberately, consciously, not to carry that wound forward into the next room, the next person, the next day. That is sacred work. That is what emotional agility looks like when it matures. It's not just about naming your emotions. It's about living in a way that doesn't outsource your sense of self to how other people behave. So, what do we do when the pain still comes? We allow it. We don't race past it or turn it into a productivity lesson. We listen. Maybe the emotion says you need to grieve, you need to rest, you need to stop chasing people who won't hold you when you're soft. That kind of listening is a form of rebirth. It makes space for a new self, not one built in reaction to trauma, but one built in response to truth. Susan David's gift is that she never promised we'd avoid pain. She only promised that we'd become more honest, more open, more able to respond with courage instead of defense. She taught that there is no one-size-fits-all answer, only moment-to-moment choices that either take us closer to our values or away from them. And maybe that's what makes her voice so different from the typical self-help tone. She doesn't tell you how to feel better. She teaches you how to be better at feeling. And maybe that's what we all needed all along. Let me end with this. You don't have to be perfect at any of this. You don't have to get it right every day. Agility isn't a checklist. It's a practice. It's a relationship with yourself that grows over time. And some days all it means is that you looked your sadness in the eye and said, I see you. You can stay. Or that you caught yourself mid-self-sabotage and whispered, not this time. That's enough. That's everything. Let's linger in the aftermath now. Not to rush closure, but to sit with the weight of what we've just walked through. Because emotional agility isn't a destination. It's a way of relating to your life with enough presence to notice when you've drifted and enough gentleness to come back. And coming back, that's the hardest part, isn't it? Not the dramatic collapse, but the quiet daily returns. After you've reacted in a way you swore you wouldn't, after you've numbed for a few days, after you said you were fine when you weren't, that's when agility matters most. Not in your ability to prevent the drift, but in your willingness to return over and over again. So maybe emotional agility isn't just a skill. Maybe it's a form of devotion to yourself, to the truth, to what matters even when it hurts. It's a deep kind of loyalty, not the fierce performative kind, but the quiet vow to stay close to your inner life, even when it would be easier to abandon it. That's where the transformation lives, not in perfection, but in presence. And presence changes everything, because when you're truly present, you stop demanding that your emotions behave before you accept them. You stop requiring your life to be smooth before you feel worthy. You let your mess be seen. And that is where connection begins, with yourself first and then with others. Emotional agility at its core is about removing the mask, not to be raw for the sake of rawness, but to be real for the sake of freedom. It lets you love without control. It lets you forgive without forgetting. It lets you say, yes, this is hard, without needing to justify why. It lets you feel the grief without believing it's proof that something went wrong. And maybe the most powerful thing it does, it lets you live in ambiguity, in not knowing, in the middle of things without forcing a resolution. That takes emotional strength. That takes agility. What does this look like in practice? It looks like stopping mid-thought to ask, is this narrative actually true or just familiar? It looks like choosing your values in moments of anger instead of choosing control. It looks like feeling shame and choosing curiosity over self-punishment. It looks like owning your story with softness instead of bearing it in silence. And even more importantly, it looks like knowing you'll mess up and still choosing to show up again tomorrow, because now you know how. This is where we arrive, not at answers, but at awareness, not at a new personality, but a new posture. You can meet yourself where you are now, without judgment, without rush, with honesty, with love. So let's take this work and live it, not perfectly, but presently. Let's carry it into conversations, into our own self-talk, into how we hold space for others, into how we breathe through our hardest moments. You don't have to do it all at once. On just one small act of emotional presence a day changes the architecture of your inner world. It teaches your nervous system that you're no longer at war with yourself, that's the revolution. There's a strange loneliness that creeps in when we live mostly in the future. You know the feeling. You're in the room, but you're not in the moment. You're rehearsing a conversation that hasn't happened. You're worrying about how you'll be perceived. You're fantasizing about a life where everything makes sense, where your ducks are in a row, where you finally arrived. But you never do arrive, because the future is a ghost. And Alan Watts calls it what it is, a collective hallucination we've agreed to prioritize over reality. He says something brutally honest. The future is a concept. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as tomorrow. And that hits like a punch to the gut, because we've built entire lives on tomorrow, on what will be, who will become, how we'll finally be okay once we get there. But there never comes, and we die often having never truly lived. not because we didn't try, but because we were always waiting for life to start. The wisdom of insecurity is this: life is now, and the only thing that keeps us from experiencing it fully is the story we tell ourselves about what it should be. We keep trading real moments for mental projections. Why? Because projections feel safer. They feel controlled, predictable, but they're empty. Watts asks, what are we afraid will happen if we fully enter the now? Here's the secret most of us don't want to admit. Presence feels like death. Not physical death, but ego death. Because to be fully in the moment is to surrender the self that defines itself by the past and plots itself into the future. When you drop all stories, all roles, all expectations, you meet the rawness of existence, the breath, the heartbeat, the aching beauty of this. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It feels vulnerable. Because there's nothing to hide behind, no image to curate, no script to follow. You're just here, alive, and maybe for the first time, that's not a performance. That's where Watts shines brightest, not in offering answers, but in dismantling the question. He doesn't tell you what to do with your life. He asks why you're always trying to do something with it instead of being in it. He says over and over, in so many ways, stop trying to become. You already are. Let's sit with that. You already are. You don't need to be more spiritual, more healed, more aligned. Those are ego pursuits too. You are not a project to be managed. You are not a task to be completed. You are a wave in motion, a moment of awareness rising and falling in an ocean that doesn't begin or end. And the tragedy is how rarely we see this, not because it's hidden, but because it's too obvious. We miss the present because we're looking through it to get to something better. But what if there's nothing better than this? I don't mean this as a sweet sentiment. I mean it as a radical, almost offensive invitation to stop escaping. Because when you really land in this moment, not as an idea, but as a direct experience, you realize there's no separation between you and the world. The tree is not something you observe, it's something you are. The breeze doesn't touch you, it includes you. Everything is happening and you're not watching it, you are it. Watts breaks the illusion that the self is a thing, separate and observing. He says, you are the universe looking at itself. Not metaphorically, literally, your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations. They are not private phenomena locked in a skull. They are expressions of the same energy that moves oceans and stars. You're not in life. You are life. When that sinks in, even for a moment, everything changes. The panic to prove yourself quiets, the fear of death softens, the compulsion to fix dissolves. Because suddenly you're no longer waiting for your life to begin, you're living it. There's a line Alan Watts offers, not in bombast, but in that careful, devastating tone he often slips into. To put it still more plainly, the desire for security and the feeling of insecurity are the same thing. Read that again slowly. The desire for security is the feeling of insecurity. The search itself is the suffering. We've been taught the opposite our whole lives, that if we just try hard enough, read enough, pray enough, work enough, we'll get there. That peace is at the end of a path, that love is a reward, that we can escape the ache if we manage things well. But Watts burns that down gently. He tells us the path we're on was the wrong one. Not because we've failed to walk it well, but because the path itself is the illusion. You're not heading anywhere, you're already here. But because you don't believe that's enough, you suffer, you grasp, you chase, you escape. And nowhere is this more painfully visible than in how we love. Most people don't fall in love with someone. They fall in love with the idea of what that person could do for their emptiness. So we attach, we cling, we demand, we treat love like it should hold us together, fix us, save us from ourselves. But it can't, because love is not a balm for insecurity. It's an invitation to witness each other in the middle of insecurity, with no promises, no ownership, no armor. Watts says that true love is like music. You don't play music to get to the end. You play it for the joy of the playing. You don't dance to arrive somewhere. You dance because something in you needs to move. Love, like music, only exists when you're in it, not when you're managing it or securing it or planning its trajectory. The moment you try to hold it too tightly, you kill its essence. And the same is true for meaning. He tears apart the Western obsession with the meaning of life because he says it's the wrong question. We want life to justify itself to us, to give us a reason for its pain, its randomness, its impermanence. But Watts points out that life isn't a riddle to solve. It's a song to be sung. Its meaning is in the doing, the being, not in any final answer. As he puts it, we are always in the process of arriving. If you've ever grieved, you know the truth of this instinctively. No philosophy helps when you've just lost someone. No perfect framework takes away that ache. But if you go into the ache, not around it, you begin to feel something deeper. The pain becomes a kind of doorway. You sit in the rawness and you stop pretending. You drop the roles, you drop the future, and you feel. And in that space, you are more alive than you've ever been. That's what Watts is pointing us toward. Not an escape from suffering, but an honest relationship with it. Not numbing, not fixing, just presence, the willingness to say, this is painful, but I'm still here. This is uncertain, but I'm still breathing. This is temporary, and maybe that's okay. He doesn't want us to transcend being human. He wants us to be human fully, consciously, without needing every moment to add up to something neat. Because in reality, it never will. Life isn't a math problem. It's a dance. It's messy. It's strange. It contradicts itself, but it's real. And maybe that's more meaningful than any answer ever could be. There's a word Alan Watts rarely uses, but everything he teaches whispers it from behind the sentences. Surrender. Not the dramatic kind, not the white flag, theatrical, I give up on everything kind. Number this surrender is quieter, more honest. It's the moment you stop wrestling with what already is. It's when you stop demanding that life explain itself and instead you feel it directly, without a story, without control. Because if there's one illusion more powerful than the future or the self, it's the illusion of control. We think we're steering this ship, that if we just do the right things, believe the right things, say the right affirmations, follow the right routines, then maybe life will unfold how we want it to. But Watts reminds us that we are not passengers in life, we are life. The wind does not steer itself. The sea does not direct its own tide. It moves, it flows, it becomes. So do we, but we resist it. We clutch. We want to own what can't be owned. Time, love, outcomes. We want guarantees. And in the process, we miss the actual living. We're so busy scripting the play that we never step on stage. Like we become spectators of our own lives, waiting for permission to feel safe enough to begin. Watts calls out this compulsion to grasp. He says the ego, the sense of I that believes it's separate, in control, permanent, is a trick of the mind. It's a thought that believes it's the thinker, and we buy into it. We think we are our plans, our roles, our reputations, our anxieties, but none of those things are solid. They shift the moment we stop looking. The I we protect is always slipping. That's why we panic. That's why we micromanage our emotions. That's why we overthink and over-explain and overperform, because we're trying to hold a mirage in place. But if you stop running, stop fixing, stop controlling even for a second, you start to sense something deeper. Beneath all that noise, you were never separate to begin with. The mind hates this. It wants a role. It wants a job. It wants to label, categorize, solve. It wants to be something. But the moment you fully surrender, not in theory, but in presence, the mind has nothing left to cling to. And that's when the peace comes. Not because you achieved it, but because you stopped resisting what was already here. And here's the paradox. Surrender feels like death to the ego, but it's actually the first breath of truth. When you stop needing life to behave, you start experiencing it. When you stop needing your emotions to be tidy, they start moving through you instead of owning you. When you stop narrating every moment, you start living it. That's why Watt's wisdom is dangerous to the modern self-help world, because he doesn't give you tips or tricks. He doesn't offer better system for your ego to run. He burns the whole operating system down. And what's left is not an answer, but a kind of freedom that doesn't need one. Let me offer you this, not as an interpretation, but as a reflection from living this. When you stop treating life like a problem to solve, it becomes something intimate. You begin to feel your coffee in your hands again. You hear your child's laughter without thinking about work. You cry without rushing to analyze it. You let a stranger's smile stay with you a little longer. Nothing changes, but everything changes. The wisdom of insecurity is not a rejection of life's pain. It's a refusal to miss the beauty in trying to avoid it. It's a return to what was always here. This breath, this moment, this heartbeat. Let's not decorate this moment. Let's not summarize it or neatly wrap it like a book review. Let's just ask the question Alan Watts left echoing in every corner of his work. What if this moment right now is all there is? Not as a slogan, not as something to nod at while we plan the next distraction, but for real. What if your life isn't a ladder? What if it's a flame, brief, flickering, beautiful, and it matters how you burn it, not where it takes you? Most of us live as if there's still time. We put off being alive until we've fixed the past, secured the future, healed the heartbreak, cleaned the house, solved the anxiety. We delay our joy, we delay our grief, we delay the truth, and we keep looking for the moment that will finally give us permission to live. But that moment never comes, because the only moment that can is this one, always this one. The wisdom of insecurity is that there is no ultimate safety, not in love, not in health, not in success, not in spirituality. Everything changes, everyone leaves, every identity erodes, but Watts says, good. That's your freedom. That's the crack in the wall where the light gets in. You can stop striving. You can stop pretending. You can stop waiting for the perfect version of your life to begin. Because guess what? There is no version coming. This is it. This heartbeat, this ache, this laughter, this breath. You are not on your way to a deeper experience. You are the deep experience. And the more you try to anchor yourself in something solid, something known, the more you miss the ocean you were always part of. But this book wasn't written to make you feel better. It was written to wake you up, to show you the cost of your constant escape, to bring you home to what you've been avoiding, that your insecurity is not a flaw, it's your doorway. That your confusion is not a sign of failure, it's your freedom. That your discomfort isn't something to fix, it's a message. You are alive. So what would happen if you stopped protecting yourself from life? You might actually feel it in all its mess. You might cry without explanation. You might laugh at nothing. You might look at someone you love and see them fully without thinking about what they give you or what they might take away. You might let a sunset hit you like music. You might let silence be enough, and in that space, without resistance, without planning, you might glimpse something sacred, not religious, not mystical, just real, unfiltered being, unbranded joy, unquestioned presence. This is not about living recklessly. It's about living honestly, letting go of the story that says you're behind, that you're not enough yet, that you need to become someone else to deserve this life. You don't. The life you're waiting for is already happening. You just forgot to notice. So we end here, not with resolution, but with return back to this moment, this breath, this body, this now. There is nothing to become. There is only being. There is nowhere to arrive. There is only here. There is no one else to be. There is only you. And that is enough. I'm here with you, still learning, still letting go, still remembering and forgetting and remembering again. That's the real path. Not upward, but inward. Not linear, but alive. So what do we feel now? What do we want to carry forward into the next quiet hour, the next interaction, the next time we're tempted to escape this moment? Because this isn't the end, this is the invitation.